KSI vs Jake Paul is the most anticipated fight in YouTube boxing history. Jake Paul has taken the boxing world by storm and has defeated the likes of Tyron Woodley and Anderson Silva. KSI came back to boxing last August as he knocked out two guys in one night, and most recently took out FaZe Temper in the first round. Jake Paul is a big favourite at the moment, and he'll become even more of a favourite if he beats Tommy Fury in devastating fashion. KSI has been trying to catch up the best he can and plans to fight one more time this year before his showdown against Jake Paul in December. Unlike a lot of boxing fans, I think KSI has a decent shot at defeating Jake Paul in a boxing match. Stylistically, I think he'll give Jake things to be wary of, and vice versa. Before we talk about KSI's keys to victory against Jake Paul, we need to analyze what KSI needs to change about his fighting style by December. If you look at the KSI Temper fight, KSI had a stance that Michael Venom Page famously used. Hands were low as he bounced back and forth. Then KSI rushes in with the right hand, lunging off the back foot to hit Temper with a strong shot. While he eventually got Temper out of there with this technique, it did take him a couple of attempts. When KSI first rushes in, he gets caught flush by Temper, and then Temper initiates a clinch to negate any further attacks from him. The approach KSI used in the Temper fight should not be used against Jake, for a few reasons. One, Jake has massive power in his right hand, and we've seen him knock people out cold with one punch. And number two, his ability to counter people that rush in is quite solid. Anderson Silva got dropped by being too careless. Nate Robinson ran straight into one of Jake's punches and got finished. Tyron Woodley even rushed in and got buzzed in their first fight. Even when KSI was just bouncing around before he rushed into attack, Temper was being very passive. He wasn't jabbing KSI or using his reach advantage. He was just standing there and allowing KSI to find his timing to get inside. Jake will not be passive at all, and when KSI does come in with this new technique, Jake will be able to counter better than Temper. We've seen Jake do this, and I think KSI is very vulnerable to a right hand in this instance. Both KSI and Jake will attempt to apply constant pressure, and KSI will get caught if he has his hands low with this stance, even before he lunges in to throw a right hand of his own. Either KSI needs to develop this style a lot more and shore up his defense, or ditch the stance entirely during the Jake fight. Even when he wasn't using this MVP-inspired stance, and he was just being over-aggressive coming inside, he got caught by a counter from Tommy. Defense is going to be key for dealing with a heavy hitter like Jake. Maybe KSI was just using this style because he knew that Temper wasn't going to be a massive threat. It could have been just a one-time use from KSI, who knows? What did KSI do right in his match against Temper? Well, his feints were super quick, and whenever Temper tried to attack, he would answer right back with a combination of his own, like a wounded animal or something. In most of the exchanges during the match, he was the aggressor and landed more shots than Temper. He ended the argument whenever they got into an exchange, and that will be vital in the Jake fight. KSI's work rate is incredible, and the way he roughs up Temper in the clinch is great as well. The body shots that KSI uses in both the Temper fight and the Pineda fight are severely underrated. If KSI can rip into that body when he fights Jake, that's something that we haven't really seen Jake need to deal with, and that might be a way to slow him down. We saw Anderson try to pour it on Jake in the last round of their fight, but that was more of an act of desperation than anything else. He got sloppy, eventually got caught, and then he was dropped by Jake. KSI will be aggressive right from the start, and if he has a tighter guard, if he's slipping shots, taking his head off the center line, and if he's showing Jake's power the respect it deserves, then I think this fight will be a lot closer than people anticipate. KSI has shown improvement from the Pineda and Swarms fight to the Temper fight, so come December, he'll be a completely different fighter hopefully. Even though I've criticized his new style, he might have just pulled off this MVP technique as a way of getting inside, because remember, Temper is 6'4". He could very well come with a brand new style when KSI vs Jake Paul happens. I think KSI's trainers over at Shoot Fighters are embracing his strengths, with him getting inside and pouring it on opponents. But yeah, with the Temper fight, you've also got to keep in mind that Temper didn't really give KSI much to worry about. It's clear that KSI didn't respect his power, and that's why he took the chances that he did during the fight. We'll have a better idea of where KSI is in terms of ability compared to Jake when we get that Joe Fournier matchup, since Temper didn't offer much resistance unfortunately. How does KSI beat Jake Paul? First of all, KSI needs to throw a ton of body shots to slow Jake down, and also to fuck with his rhythm. During Jake's most recent fight, Anderson didn't throw enough body shots and was mainly headhunting. If KSI goes in and throws heavy hooks to the body, it's going to be interesting to see how Jake handles that. Feinting and actually setting up big shots is another key to victory for KSI. Like I said before, KSI was feinting really well against Temper, and they were fast. Anderson was kinda swinging wildly at times without setting up with the jab, and Jake easily moved out of the way of these. Making Jake think more about what shot is coming and KSI switching up his attacks will be needed to win. My final piece of advice, I guess, to KSI is to not be stationary. Anderson was staying in place during the latter portion of the fight. I mean, even the commentators were saying that he needs to be more of a moving target. Sure, Anderson was slipping a lot of shots, but Jake had more success than he should have, and most of that was due to Anderson not moving enough. KSI should push the pace, cut off the ring properly when he can, and not allow Jake to tee off on him by standing still like Anderson back during their fight. I think KSI vs Jake Paul won't be a wash like people are saying, with Jake just blitzing KSI. It will be a very aggressive match, with the most action we've seen in any of Jake's fights. Let me know your predictions for KSI vs Jake Paul, and I also want to know how many pay-per-view buys do you think it'll do. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you later.